Hey folks, JD here, and this is Comics Are Awesome, 2016 style. In today's episode, we're discussing my top 5 new comics of 2015. What does that mean precisely? Well, it means it has to be a new comic book that started in 2015. Otherwise, the title makes no sense. Everything else, you'll probably be able to figure out on your own.
Honorable mentions. Vision. In this new series, the Vision has made a creepy plastic family and moved them to the suburbs. What could go wrong? This series is a dark comedy exploring the artificiality of suburban living alongside the cold, muted emotions of a family of androids. It's far too new to make a decisive judgment on, but it's definitely one to keep an eye on. Airboy. This is a deeply personal series written by James Robinson, starring himself and his artist Greg Hinkle, being asked to take on another Golden Age hero, this time the titular Airboy. Robinson expresses his doubts as a writer, wondering if he's a one-trick pony, admitting that some of his recent comic books have not been great and that life in general has been kind of shitty lately. Only for Airboy to show up in the last page of the first issue. The 4-issue mini isn't for everyone. It's very inside baseball, but if you've ever been a fan of Robinson or know the frustrations of being a creative type, this book is probably one of the best books of the year. Number 5. Silk. Marvel is just nailing it out of the park lately when it comes to its Spider-Man franchise, but even better in my opinion is what they've been doing with the Spider Ladies. This year we saw the launch of Spider-Gwen, Spider-Woman, and Silk. Spider-Gwen has the best costume and Spider-Woman is the funniest, but Silk, in my eyes, is the best of the three as it manages to find the balance of humor and telling a story of a captivating character. No pun intended, as the premise of the series is that, unbeknownst to Peter Parker, Cindy Moon was bitten by the same radioactive spider that gave Peter his powers. However, while Peter went on to become Spider-Man, Cindy was forced to stay in a bunker for years for her own protection. When Spider-Man found out about Cindy and freed her, she found the world had changed, her family is missing, and her hormones can't help herself around Peter. As such, she eventually chooses to strike it out on her own as the heroine Silk. She also got a costume rather than walking around in webbing, so she's got that going for her. One of the most common comparisons to Silk is the Netflix show Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, which also had a female lead emerging from a bunker after years of seclusion. But Kimmy is primarily a comedy, while Silk has comedy elements that are heightened by her time away from the modern world, and the fact that she's a novice hero. It never veers too far from the more grounded drama either. She is new both to the world around her and being a superhero, but she is determined to succeed at it. And her period of being alone also means that she's a little too self-reliant at times, rejecting help that she might also need. This all blends together well to make Silk a fascinating character, and the humor keeps it light and bubbly enough that you might not even notice it. This book weaves a strong web that you're wanting to get caught up in. Number 4. Howard the Duck. One of the biggest surprises of last year's Guardians of the Galaxy film was, spoiler alert, Howard the Duck showing up in the after-credits scene. While it was just a fun gag, it got a lot of people excited about the future of Howard, and Marvel is more than willing to fill any niche for people who want to spend money. So out of the mothballs came a new series that is surprisingly good. When Steve Gerber created Howard, it was as a comical character who could comment on the world around him. Howard, coming from another dimension, would get shocked and angry about how much us Heroes Apes have screwed things up. But this version goes a bit softer. No longer is he trapped in a world he's never made, but trapped in a world he's grown accustomed to. He's a bit more world-weary, but not quite as angry. But that doesn't mean he's any less funny. Chip Zdarsky is a wickedly funny writer. The humor shifted from commentary on current events to more about the comics themselves, as Howard runs a detective agency that keeps getting involved in weird cases. When Spider-Man thinks Howard is dead, he starts suffering Uncle Ben levels of guilt. When Hulk has mentioned an editor's box reminds us that she is not a cat nor particularly satanic. The big MacGuffin for the first story arc winds up being the Infinity Gauntlet's lesser-known knockoff, the Abundant Glove, which has 2 dance stones. I mean, why aren't you reading this? This is a fresh, not foul series. Number 3. Archie. Well, here's a series I never would have thought I'd be covering on this show. Archie Comics for a long time was one of the quintessential books you'd find around in barbershops or a doctor's waiting room and almost never seen anywhere else. And I don't want to sound like I'm a hater, they were amusing books with romance and comedy at the forefront and a perpetually 50s aesthetic. But that's about it. It's like a piece of bubblegum, fun while it lasts, but once it loses its flavor, you spit it out. But over the last few years, Archie has been trying to shake off its old image. Most notably, a couple years ago, they came out with Afterlife with Archie, which used the Riverdale gang as a contrast to the series' horror story being told. But what really caught my attention was a brand new updated series by Mark Waid, and the first 3 issues featuring art by Fiona Staples. Waid is an old pro who has just wrapped up a killer run on Daredevil, and Staples is the artist behind one of my most easily recommendable series, Saga. But I had a few doubts. Waid is a middle-aged man. Hell, I'm almost 20 years younger than him, and I have no clue what teenagers act or talk like, so I was a bit worried that he might get all the Archie kids turned into a pack of poochies and lose anything that was special about them. However, I need not worry, as Wade seems to have nailed the writing. This is still the Archie gang, but written with a lot more nuance and thought than they were typically given. Yes, Archie still waffles between Betty and Veronica, but it's no longer written as the two girls being passive and hoping that Archie would choose one or the other. They're no longer prizes to be won, but instead women who have their own issues, Archie being only one of them. Also, they don't tend to care much for each other, which makes far more sense than them being friends and romantic rivals at the same time. Even Jughead is given a compelling backstory, generally portrayed as the weird kid who has a certain amount of Zen wisdom beyond his years, instead of being the women-hating kid who mostly likes hamburgers. So I recommend you all take a trip down to Riverdale High and hang out with Archie. Number 2, Paper Girls. I feel a special bond with writer Brian K. Vaughan. I was an active member of his message board back in the day. His Marvel comic Runaways not only got me back into comics after some time away, but it was also the first review I did for this show 5 years ago. Damn, I feel old now. Anyway, so I'm guaranteed to pick up just about anything from him, and he's had a heck of a lot of output this year. I was really tempted to include on this list We Stand on Guard, a futuristic story set in Canada after the US invades following an act of terrorism is linked to our northern neighbors. I'm on to you, Dan Olsen of Folding Ideas, but I chose to narrow it down to one series from Vaughan, and that would have to be Paper Girls. Paper Girls is set in 1988 and is about a group of preteen newspaper delivery girls.
I feel like I should probably explain here. You see, kids, when your parents were kids, we got our news delivered to us in bundles of paper. And they take these bundles of paper, stack them up in their homes, and die tragically in a house fire years later. Nostalgia.
While making rounds early in the morning of the day after Halloween, 4 paper girls discover a seemingly alien threat. And I don't want to spoil much else. What makes Paper Girls stand out for me is that it reminds me a lot of the Steven Spielberg era of stories, most obviously Goonies, featuring kids actually acting like kids. They fit into the obvious roles, the brainy one, the sporty one, the rebel, and the new kid. But they don't feel like stereotypes either. If this had been a movie 30 years ago, it would have been entirely gender flipped. But it also doesn't feel like this book is rubbing girl power in your face either. It's a smartly written 80s boys adventure film that just happens to be a 2015 comic with an all-female cast. And that is good news. Number 1, The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. My final book today is perhaps not the best book on this list, but it's easily the one I look most forward to each month. I've been a big fan of Squirrel Girl since she showed up in the page of the Great League Avengers comics several years back. The GLA was a bunch of wannabe heroes who weren't terribly competent or heroic, but Squirrel Girl was the exception. Her very first appearance had her defeating Dr. Doom, and since then the ongoing joke has been that she is unbeatable, no matter how seemingly outclassed a young woman with a tail and the ability to speak with squirrels should be. This caused her to get quite a fan base, so in early 2015 they launched the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, and it was all kinds of awesome. So much so that it's kind of hard to explain. Humor is hard to define, but when it clicks, it just clicks, and this book clicks so well with me. The basic premise is that Squirrel Girl is going to college, and, well, that's about it, really. She has a roommate named Nancy who is obsessed with cats, Thor, and pictures of Thor as a cat, and she has 2 crime-fighting buddies, Chipmunk Hunk and Koi Boy. I really don't know what else to say. Seriously, how do I follow up on Koi Boy? There's nothing I don't love about this. The art that just pops, the sharply clever writing, the fact that the book routinely features key Marvel characters, often just to poke fun at them in a loving manner, Deadpool's Guide to Supervillains, and the Easter egg text hidden near the bottom of most pages that usually poke fun at the story itself. Seriously, if love was a physical thing, this book would kick it into pulp, flatten that pulp into paper, and paradoxically create itself. It's not only that good, it's unbeatable. Thanks for watching, folks. Let me know what your favorite book of 2015 was in the comments below. Remember to please rate, share, and subscribe. Unless you don't want to do that, in that case, don't do any of those things because it will not benefit you in any appreciable way. Until next time, folks, remember, comics are awesome.
Geek Vision.